This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so we're going to get started. We've got, I know, a couple people still dialing in, which is fine. But the gang's gathered here in Chicago, so thanks for letting Greg and I come out and do this demo from here. I love this training room. This is my favorite spot. So this is a good one. So what we wanted to do is spend a few minutes this morning talking about the new concept call. So for those of you who participated in the training for the PHAs a few weeks ago, you kind of saw from their angle what they're doing. But now we're at the point where you all need to see what you're doing. Concept call requests have started coming in. We've got, I think, 3 active that have been assigned across various TMs. I know Arnold and TJ here in Chicago have one, and Stephen Beasley in DC has one. And so we're slowly but surely moving our way through that. So it's time to kind of describe to people what you're going to see and what you're going to do. So a few changes, and I'm going to use Arnold as my example. So we're going to go through a transaction with Arnold here. So first I'm going to log on. So the first thing you're going to notice when you log in is there's some slight changes to the to your views. We've added a new card. You'll see the concept call assigned. You all will start seeing that. And you'll notice this transactions assigned card over here. At the moment, the readiness work is being phased out. So at the end of October, all readiness work will be done. And Greg has worked with the enterprise team who handles most all of the readiness work and kind of walked through how that's going to happen. So any PHA that's been in the program for a while, they're going to go straight to the TA portion of this, where they will no longer have readiness work, and if they need some help, they'll be able to request TA. And you saw my demo that I did for PHAs a few weeks ago, so that's kind of how that goes through. There are 17 PHAs that are new to the RAD program over the last few months. So they're still inside the 4-month window, the kickoff call window, the launch window. We haven't kind of come up with a name yet, but the window where a kickoff call will occur and the PHAs will be trained to launch into RAD. And so those 17 will actually get TA assigned to them through the readiness, through the enterprise contract. So they'll be onboarded that way. Everyone else, including the readiness work that you all were doing, is going to disappear. So right now, Arnold has 1 PHA that still is in readiness. He had 2 this morning. Indianapolis was on that list, and I cleared that off because Indianapolis is not going to be eligible for readiness. They're just kind of getting moved through. Now, a number of you transaction managers are working with quote-unquote large PHAs, and most of you know who you are. And to the extent you don't, you'll be notified shortly. There are probably 20 to 25 PHAs that are either large PHAs like the City of New York, or they have a large portfolio that they're working through, like Tulsa, for example. Those already had been getting some hand-holding. Chicago, that Aisha was working on. So they're already getting some hand-holding. They will continue to get that hand-holding from you all. And the expectation is that you'll continue on whatever schedule you're on. Some of you do monthly calls. Some of you do every other week. I know Tamika talks to New York every day. So it's just whatever that is. But it's not going to really be called readiness work anymore. And it's not going to show up on an assignment per se. So we've had some TMs say, well, how do I find them? Well, the way you find them is you go to your search card. So all TMs can see all transactions. They only can work on transactions they're assigned to. And now that work is exclusively financing plans. But if you want to see information on one, so for example, if Arnold was interested in having a conversation with Indianapolis, he would simply go look up Indianapolis through the search card, and voila, he can still see all of Indianapolis's transactions. So if he has a regularly scheduled call with Indianapolis every 6 weeks or so, and he's getting ready for that call, he simply can look them up and go see what's been going on with Concord Homes East, for example. Since they haven't submitted a financing plan, you're going to come up to their concept call checklist. And you're going to see, first of all, here are all the things that they are missing, right? So the great thing about the concept call, which has already started working with PHAs, which I'm excited, is it's really easy for them to see what they need to do, okay? So in this case, there are 5 items that they need to complete before they can even request a concept call. So that tells you, yeah, they're doing a little bit, right? But they're still not ready. Then you can see what they've answered on the checklist, which in no surprise here is none, because they haven't really thought about this yet. It's still new. And we're going to look at one in a minute that's completed. But they're going to need to do this, okay? You can still see the financing plan documents that they've uploaded. So none of your views have really changed. It's just how you get to this point, okay? So again, if Arnold's working with Indianapolis, he wants to go see this transaction, he can get there. He just has to go through it a different way, okay? So that's a change that I want everybody to be made aware of. But let's go back to the main page, and we'll see here that this new card, concept calls assigned. So all of you eventually will have a concept call assigned to you, and so you'll have something on this card, and when you click on it, you'll see all of them, right? So I see in parentheses I have 1. If there were 10, then I'd have 10 in parentheses, and then I'd see them listed out for me, so I can get to them directly from here, okay? So we want to take a look at this Forest Green Apartments. So Arnold has been assigned Forest Green Apartments concept call. When you as a transaction manager are assigned a concept call, you're going to be assigned by your branch chief, and then your first task is to set up the call. You're setting up the call with, obviously, yourself and the PHA, and public housing, and if it's a PBRA conversion, the account executive, okay? So how do I do that, Robert? What do I do? Well, remember, we have this nice contacts button up here. This contact button gives you all the information you need to schedule your concept call. So you will need to send an email to all of the people on the PHA's list. All of these people should be contacted to set up a concept call. In addition to that, on page 2, you'll see the HUD staff. Okay? So in this case, we've got 2 PIH field office contacts that ought to be contacted about this. Okay? Typically, what I've been advising folks is contact the PHA about the concept call and let them contact anybody else that's on the list below. So in this particular case, you see that the proposed project owner information is there. I would not be sending an email to the proposed project owner. I'd be sending it up here. If there's a consultant listed above, so you see in this case all of the Wilson Housing Authority folks are there. If Peter Behringer, for example, was also identified by the PHA as a consultant at the top, I would include them. I would include anybody in this top section. Those are people that the primary contact for the PHA has identified as having access to the resource desk and should be contacted. Okay? That's how I would handle that. All right. So once you have got that list together, you put together your date for that concept call. How long should I wait? I would say within the next few days, right? Because what I'm going to talk about next is what you need to do to get prepared for the concept call, which is not too much, but there is some work that needs to be done. So when you get that email saying you've been assigned a concept call, you ought to get on top of it, and particularly right now, because there are a number of PHAs, Wilson included, who are very antsy because they feel like RECAP's changed the rules on them now, and somehow this is going to slow things down. It's not going to slow things down, and I think as we get through this training, you'll see that that's going to speed some things up. But they don't know that yet. So let's be extra responsive. Not that you wouldn't be, but let's be extra responsive. So before I click to the documents, I just want to kind of show you what your card, when you click on the concept call to hold the concept call, here's here's what happens. So you see, we've got some interesting dates. This concept call expected date. That was the date based on when the financing plan was due that you would have expected them to have a concept call. So 60 days from the financing plan due date. We've taken that off of the front page for the PHAs because it was confusing some people. So now they don't see that once they've requested the concept call. So it shows up on their page is when the concept call is expected, and then once they request it, that date goes away because they've got a requested date that's been replaced for that. So we also see that here. This was requested on the 15th. Okay, so you see that. All right, and then you see that you've been assigned. As I scroll down, you'll notice a new card. This new card, the concept call review card, is only visible to HUD. So you don't have to worry about the PHA seeing this information. We've created two comment boxes for you, similar to what was on the readiness, if you remember the readiness page for TMs, where you can write notes to yourself, and you can also send an email to the PHA directly from here. Okay? So this is going to be very important for you to fill out once you hold the concept call. So obviously, we're going to put the date that it was held, okay? The date that you completed your review, which will probably be the same day or the next day, okay? Then this is really, really, really important. Outcome. The PHA cannot, I repeat, cannot submit a financing plan unless you invite them to do so, okay? So what they've got on their page is, right now, Wilson, North Carolina, there are no buttons for them to push because the concept call request date has been pushed, and it's now grayed out because they can't request another one because they've already requested it. But the financing plan submit button is not showing up for them, okay? Because you haven't invited them to submit. So in order for that button to show up, you're going to have to select invite to submit, okay? And then send an email, hit the send the email button to the PHA, which is going to say to them, you've been invited to submit. That's the best of all possible worlds. What if they're not ready to submit? What do I do? Well, you're going to select not ready to submit. And when you do that, you're going to type in this section, details for email, what it is you need from the PHA in order for them to submit the financing plan. Now, they're going to have to request another concept call, and you're going to have an opportunity to look at what they've submitted to confirm that what you asked for has been submitted. Okay? So, it may be a situation where they simply need to do something on the environmental side. It's one quick thing, and you can tell them that in the email, right? Or it might be something is you have no idea what you're doing, right? You need to go back to the drawing board. This transaction does not work. Okay? Right? So those are different outcomes, and we're going to kind of work through this as we're doing it. You can also, very important, if you say not ready to submit, you can also extend their financing plan due date here. So if they're not ready to submit, and their financing plan is due the end of November, and what you've asked them to do is going to take them 4 months, send them the email and reset their financing plan at the same stage. So why is this okay, and why are we not having to go through an approval process? Because the branch chiefs are on the concept call with you, and they have the authority to allow an extension. So you should talk through this with your branch chief before you make any determination. Okay? So this should be shared with them.
Right. So this extension will go through the branch chief and not necessarily.
This extension will be this will be simply that, an extension. There will not be an extension request. When I put a date in there, if I put February 28th in there, the extension is automatically approved. Right? There's no request. There's nothing going to Alan. Right? Because it's the other.
Add a reason or anything because your branch chief.
That's correct. So your details to the PHA, you're going to tell them why you're extending it. Your branch chief bought off on this because they were on the call with you at the same time, right? So that's how that's going to work. All right. Again, internal comments. If you want to write some comments, take some notes or whatever, which is perfectly fine. But when you have anything on the right-hand side and you send that email to the PHA, that's what's going to the PHA. Okay. Now, let me just take a quick look and see. I've got some questions.
So Robert, what if the item or items that the PHA needs to correct are important, but once they submit them, if I'm the TM, I don't need to talk about the transaction in its totality again. Do I still request everybody to have a concept call again and all the PIH staff back on the board? Or there were some things that I thought that was deficient in what they did with the concept call. They need to fix it. I want to see it fixed before I have them move forward. Can they send that to me and then I can approve it as the TM and then give them the approved financing plan? Or does it require a new financing plan, a new concept call?
In my mind, you would not need to do a whole new concept call. Okay, so I think that if there are like 3 things that need to be done, and they do them and hit the button to request a concept call, and you log in and see that they're there, I don't even think you need to have another call. You could simply invite them to submit the financing plan. I think that could be handled over email.
All right, so let's
No problem.
walk through that again. So I have a concept call, I've got all the cast of characters on it, but you're not fully comfortable with it. And there are a few things that you feel they need to fix or improve or to tighten up before you're ready to give them the approval. They then go back, they reload whatever they need to reload, and they push the concept call request button again, right, Robert?
Right.
They would request it again.
Yep.
But you as the TM would say, okay, I see they've given me now what I wanted. I don't need to go and have another concept call. I can hit approve. Correct. There's nothing that requires me to have the call.
That's correct.
If I feel as if things are far enough along, they did what I wanted them to do, let me approve this, go ahead and submit a file.
That's exactly
So
right.
requesting another concept call is more of a formality, and then it's up to the discretion
Correct.
of the TM
Right.
to determine if those items.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the way I would handle that is in the email that I send to them after the first concept call, I would say that. I would say, we need your phase 2 environmental review, a phase 2 environmental posted before you can submit your financing plan. Once that's uploaded to the resource desk, shoot me an email and I will invite you to submit your financing plan. Right? I think you can lay that out.
All right, but you're saying invite me to submit a financing plan, or just go back into the system, press request again.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. They'll have to request a concept call.
Yeah,
At which
request
point in
again.
time I can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
Yep.
all I'll need to do
That's all
is
I need to do.
request it and I'll approve.
Exactly right. Yep. Yep.
We won't have a second call.
Correct. Arnold?
And I was thinking, in the lines along with what Aisha has and what I have with Phoenix and probably with Greensboro, is that we have these bi-weekly calls, or pretty much have an understanding and looking at documents as they upload them. And so initially, when it's probably time for them to request a call, I mean, you might be in a position to just almost immediately.
Right.
And that will be the case for the PHAs that you're working with, these larger PHAs.
Right,
But
right.
just know that that's not going to be the case for 90% of the PHAs
Right,
out there now, right?
right,
Because the readiness work is gone, because you're not going to be working with Roberta, Georgia
Right.
anymore on an individual basis. You're only going to be working with the New Yorks and the Chicagos.
But I agree,
If you have that relationship,
you have that
sure,
relationship, and you
absolutely.
know, and you see it all as it comes in. Right. If you feel there's not a need to have a concept call because everything is complete, just go past it. Just accept it. I'm fine with that.
So I've got a question here. Tanya sent in a question saying, what about those new construction PBRA conversions where you would like to get a phase 1 or a phase 2 ahead of the financing plan?
Yeah.
So that is 100%, that is exactly why we believe the concept call is going to be so beneficial, Tanya, because when you have the concept call with them and you see that they've not submitted the phase 1, they've only submitted the phase 1 but not the phase 2, you're going to say, guys, I need the phase 2 before you can submit the financing plan. And then you will not invite them to submit, and you'll send them a note back saying, you've got to get this done and request another concept.
Robert, how would they have been able to submit for a concept call in the first place if that,
So we haven't, yeah, that's a great question, because we haven't actually looked at the documents yet.
Okay.
So let's take a look now. Okay, so Wilson, North Carolina requested a concept call, and Arnold's scheduling the call. I showed you how to do that. I showed you what you're going to do at the end. Well, what do I do to get ready for the concept call? So the resource desk didn't let them select that button if they hadn't uploaded conversion overview, the e-tool, environmental, the DDA number, any site neighborhoods or FHEO reviews and approvals that need to be done. So all those things are built into the system, but I still need to look at them. It's just not a detailed review, but it's just, what do I look at to get comfortable with the transaction? So the place that I believe you should start is right here on the page we're on, which is the concept called checklist. This checklist is designed to identify issues before they become issues. So I would walk through and see what they're saying here. So they said no to new construction, no to substantial rehab, no to transfer of systems. They've got a whole bunch of no's, okay? Then they're getting into, does the scope of work match the transaction log, the cost? Yes. ADR, IDRR. Is this an existing mixed finance transaction? The system knows that because the box is checked when they came in. So they're asked to explain what's going on here, and they have. Same thing with EPC, CFFP, okay? They've been asked to explain those things. When you get down here further, to Tanya's point, are there any known environmental concerns? So they're told to let you know about this, okay? So hopefully they're being honest with you, right? Because it's going to make the process go a lot smoother. But this is what I'm going to look at first. After I've looked at this, I'm going to go to the financing plan page, because that's where they've been uploading documents. Because remember, they want to submit their financing plan. That's why they're asking for this concept call. So they ought to have done a bunch here, okay? And sure enough, I've got a conversion overview. I'm going to read that. That whole thing, right? I'm going to make sure that what I read there matches what they answered in the concept call checklist, right? This is the most detailed part of the review I'm going to do in preparing for the concept call right here. I'm reading that conversion overview. Now, I am then going to open up the PCA and make sure that it validates. I'm going to look at their flags report and make sure that the flags answers are there. If they're not, that's going to be on my agenda to talk to them about. Why did you not submit answers to the flags, right? I'm not doing a detailed review of this. I'm not going to look and see what they included here, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to do that, right? That's going to be when I review the financing plan. I'm not going to do a deep dive into CNA yet, but I am going to look and see that it validates. I'm going to look and see that the flags reports are there, okay? Similarly with the environmental, I'm going to make sure it's there, okay? This is a PBV, so I'm going to look for the Part 58. If this was a PBRA, I want to make sure that the Phase 1 was there, and I would want to make sure that it's entered at HEROES. How would I do that? I'm going to have to get in touch with my branch chief to find out if it's posted, because I can't see that, okay? More than likely, they're going to have assigned it to Alan, because he is the default HEROES assignment person, and then he will assign it to whichever TM. If he's on top of it, he may have assigned it to you already, but we don't know. Alan and I are going to meet on that later this week and talk about it.
So in the case, going back to Tanya's question, in the case where it's a PBRA transaction, they should have a Part 50 submitted through HEROES.
Yep.
I'm going to first see whether that's the case. If it's not, I'm not having a concept call.
Right. Or, yeah, I may very well not have a concept call, or certainly on the concept call, the very first thing I'm going to say to you is, you're not submitting your financing plan.
Right.
You know.
But they shouldn't have the concept call if they haven't.
You know, I've gone back and forth on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear you, but I also think, particularly in the early stages of rolling this out, it's going to be more beneficial to have the call rather than not have it. Because maybe we're going to learn something as we're doing this. You know, that there's a reason why they're not. I think that right now, when a concept call request comes in, you ought to be holding concept calls, regardless of what the submission looks like. As you get busier and busier, I think you're exactly right. Maybe in a month from now, when we're getting 500 of these requests.
Yeah.
But right now, I think it's worth having the call, just to get the training and let them know and use the functionality, right? So go back to the point where I'm going to be rejecting the concept call, right? And I want to be able to start doing that. You know, I want to be using this functionality. I want to not invite you to submit. I want to say, you're not ready, right? Let's start sending that message. Because I do think that's going to be important. As we all know, this PHA community is pretty small, and when people start understanding how this works, maybe they will be more responsive. You know, we've got a couple of PHAs right now that are trying to force their way in, because they were ready to go before this rolled out, and this is a big inconvenience, blah, 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 blah. You know, they thought it was a rubber stamp. Well, it turns out, in both cases, they're actually not ready. You know, and we know that, right? So.
Good. That's kind of the way I looked at this particular assignment, because it was a number of if we're looking at the financing plan, you'll see that a number of documents have been uploaded since they scheduled the call.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yep. Just checking my notes here. Janine, I'm seeing you asking to be a presenter. Do you want me to? I'm going to unmute you just to see if you have a question. Hey, Janine. You there?
Yeah. You need to unmute me?
Unmuted you. You got a question?
No.
Okay. There you go. I'm going to remute you.
No offense.
All right. Okay. So after you've reviewed the conversion overview, taken a look at the e-tool, the environmental, make sure that's there. Now you're ready for the call. SEMA was nice enough to work with me over the last few months on a script for the concept call. So we've got that script. So Arnold and TJ will use it. Steven's going to use it. We're going to refine it. Once we're all good with it, we're going to put it on the resource desk. So there is a script that you all will be able to follow that kind of lays out how we want to conduct the call, what we want to talk about. But generally speaking, the concept call ought to cover any problems that you're seeing. What don't you understand? Wilson, North Carolina, for example, they're an interesting transaction because they've actually closed a RED conversion a couple of years ago, and they're coming in with what they believe is a part of an already converted transaction, which makes no sense. So it's going to be very interesting on that call to find out what's going on with that, because they had to have a standalone entity closed the first time, and they seem to have somehow think that these two transactions are linked and that they're coming in for a second conversion, which doesn't make any sense. Greg and I have talked to the executive director a couple of times, and it's confusing to us. And we basically think that there is maybe one overarching ownership group that these are actually two different transactions, two different properties that are just owned under one umbrella. But we'll see. But that's going to be something that you're definitely going to want to talk about. We've got if there are any environmental issues, if there's anything that comes up. I know that TJ's got one that's going to be an interesting one that's got to move really fast, right? So what's the need to move really fast, right? What really is going on here? So the goal, and we've talked about this a number of times as we were developing this and starting the rollout, the goal for the concept call is for you as a transaction manager to get a good financing plan to review, to stop getting financing plans in the door that aren't really ready, that aren't fully baked, that are constantly changing because people want to meet that financing plan deadline, and then they want to start working on the deal. That hasn't worked. So bake the deal, request the concept call, then we'll talk about whether you can do the financing. So you're now in control. I was talking to SEMA this morning. The nice thing for me is you as a transaction manager are determining with your branch chief whether or not you're willing to work on this deal, whether they've done what's necessary to actually review a financing plan. Because if you don't understand it at concept call, it's not going to get any better, right? That's the goal here, right? So piggybacking on something that Greg said earlier, it's going to take a little while. These concept call requests are going to come in, and some are going to make it and some are not going to make it, and you all are going to kind of find your way. But by next year, January, February, March, things will start rolling. There's a lot of automation behind this. The resource desk is sending out lots of notices to PHAs that are, you're 60 days, you should be requesting your concept call. You're 30 days, you should be requesting your concept call. There's a team in headquarters that's going to then take those ones that have not 20 days away from financing plan due date, and there's been no contact to the resource desk. There's a team in headquarters that's going to contact them. So all of these delinquent financing plans that we've seen over the last few years, that's hopefully going to start whittling down. PHAs are either going to get the act together or they're going to be kicked out, right? So financing plan extension requests may spike. Alan's going to be doing all of those now because there's no branch chief assigned anymore. Alan is the decider on financing plan extension, right? So SEMA's not going to see them. You guys aren't going to be involved. PHAs do them directly through the resource desk, right? So we'll see how that works. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Questions in the room? I want to see if I've got any more questions.
Just going back to what
Yep.
Greg said earlier, for the larger PHAs and kind of what Arnold was saying, if you see that everything's in there, then you don't have to, you can just invite them to submit.
No.
Or what was, I just wanted to clarify that.
So if let's go back to the example that we were looking at. So if I'm working with Indianapolis and I've been talking to them, and I've been looking at Concord Homes, right? First of all, this very first page tells me that they're not ready to submit because I've got all these things, right? There's no button for them to push, right? But I go to the financing plan and I see that they have been submitting a whole bunch of documents, right? So they ought to be getting close. So if I'm having a regular call with them, or even an irregular call with them, I might say, looks like you're getting close on Concord East. When do you think you might be requesting a concept call?
Okay.
Right? But the concept call request has to come in, and then, in this case, Arnold will already be assigned, because he's working with Indianapolis already, he'll be assigned that concept call immediately. So he'll get a direction from the resource desk, you need to schedule a concept call. It won't have to be assigned by you yet. So he'll get that, and then if it's as simple as, I'm ready to go, and he knows that, then he can make the determination on his page with your concurrence that, I'm just going to invite them to submit. So he doesn't actually have to hold the concept call.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Right.
That's what
They have to request it,
And
you
those
don't have
things
to
would be
hold it.
cleared. Those things would be cleared.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, all that stuff would be
A
cleared.
lot of that is really, we're investing it with you, the transaction manager, your knowledge of that PHA. For these large PHAs where you're having monthly or bi-monthly or coordination calls, you may have a really good understanding. Aisha may know in Chicago that Ickey's 1D is, scheduled to come in next month. You've been talking about it in your monthly calls, and you see that they've requested a concept call, but everything that they need looks lined up, right? And you're like, fine, I don't need a call. I would just have that all the transaction managers, if you're not going to have the call, just run it by your branch chief, right? Just to say, hey, SEMA, I don't think we need a call in this case. I'm just going to push the button, advance it. It's fine. Now, on the other hand, let's say, I don't know if Roger's on the line this morning, but we may get an El Paso where they've always been a little slipshod in terms of sort of submitting complete applications or complete financing plans. And Roger's like, no, I want to hold them to the fire, right? Because they always do this to me. And I see that they haven't even given me they're submitting junk. I want to get them on the call, and I want to make sure that they get the message from me. So for those 20 or 25 PHAs where we have this ongoing coordination still, you have discretion about, since you know about the transaction, whether you want to just advance it and say, yes, go ahead now and submit, because I can see I'm familiar with the project.
And I think I would just make a note.
Yeah.
In the interior of your comments, I think I would just say, I've been working with this PHA for the last 6 months. All their documents are there. I'm going to invite them to submit without conflict. Right? Because there is an expectation with PIH and with asset management that the concept calls are going to be held. Right? So if you're going to bypass that, they may. But if they're participating in the calls anyway, you may just want to let them know that's not going to happen.
Do you expect any sort of pushback, because all these PHAs talk to each other, large, small, and just them saying, oh, they didn't get okay.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yep.
And we're fine with conveying that too, because I'm sure we'll. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem. All right. Other questions, comments? For those three.
The thing that PHAs will be very sensitive to is, we taking too long. I submitted a request. It's been 24 hours, I haven't heard. So So, once they submit the request, because we don't have readiness transaction manager anymore, it could be Brockton, Colorado, or whatever. There's no, so that you have no relation. We have to first assign the concept call to a branch chief, and then the branch chief assign it to a transaction manager. So we're gonna definitely lose a couple days just in that, but that's fine. But once we get it, we haven't set any standard yet, but just for now, just be as responsible as you can, responsive as you can in setting up the calls, so that, people feel as if they're moving.
Is there an expected time frame?
There isn't.
I mean,
We haven't published anything or
Yeah.
not.
Well,
We
Alan,
haven't told
Karen,
them
and I are.
anything.
No, we haven't told them anything. No.
One of the things that I will also let folks know is that this shift away from readiness work and shift towards doing things at the resource desk has already generated some interesting requests of Greg for TA. So it's been fascinating to see because there have been some legitimate TA requests, but there have been some ones were generally resource desk related. There was one this morning about an application issue. And just for your all's own well-being, push those kinds of questions to the resource desk. You do have relationships. It's not like we're walking away from these PHAs. You're going to have a relationship with PHAs, and you've been doing a lot of things for them, right? You have been helping process CHAP amendments, for example. You have been asking for, in a lot of cases, the financing plans extensions. So when you get a comment back, shoot them, just let them know, yeah, I used to help you with that, but this needs to be taken care of through the resource desk, so please email the resource directly. Please use the tools on the resource desk, because the PHA, all of their action items here, they can do all of these things. They can do all of the stuff that they need to do. They can request a CHAP amendment directly through the resource desk now. We've had one so far. You all know how many CHAP amendments we process on a daily basis. That's a little disconcerting to me right now. I'm a little worried about the CHAP amendment process, because that's something that we had a lot of feedback as we were rolling this out. Oh my God, the CHAP amendments, how can you possibly keep up with that? That's such a hard thing. So, we've had one through the resource desk. But also, I think now is an opportunity for these PHAs to understand they don't need a lot of the CHAP amendments that they're getting, they don't actually need, because they don't actually know what they're doing. They don't need a CHAP amendment until they know what they're doing, right? And the new portfolio award allows more flexibility around that, because a lot of the PHAs were worried about holding on to units. Oh my gosh, I got to keep all these units, and I want to. You don't care so much about that anymore. They have 2 years, right? So we'll see what happens there. Anything else before I wrap up? Okay. So guys on the line, I'm going to just do one last look and see if anybody has any questions. I did record this. We will post it to the resource desk for you guys to enjoy at a later date, because I know you all love to listen to me talk.
Oh, Robert,
Yes.
real quick, just, we were talking earlier about, say you have an FHA transaction, and just briefly walk through, obviously, we invite the FHA underwriter to the
Right,
call,
that's a great question.
Yeah.
I didn't forget about that. So yes, Seema asked earlier. So on FHA transactions, since we stole the quote-unquote concept call from FHA, it's going to be very confusing potentially to have the lender have a concept call with FHA and the PHA have a concept call with the RAD team. I think it's important that the coordination between the account executives, and if there's an FHA underwriter identified, that would be very helpful for you all on FHA transactions. But remember, when you're looking at FHA transactions, and when you have a concept call request, the documentation needs to be there, for example, for the e-tool and for the environmental, but you're not doing the review. So all you care about is that it's entered into HEROES, that it documents uploaded. You don't need to look at it for a concept call, for sure. There's nothing for you to look at. The FHA underwriter is dealing with all that stuff. The concept call, have you submitted all your information? Yeah. Does it match what you've done in FHA? That's what you're checking. When you have an FHA deal, all you're checking is that the lender narrative, the transaction log, and the e-tool line up. As long as those things line up, it doesn't matter what they're doing, right? Now, that said, we all know we have to make sure and check on Energy Star, right? And the more efficient items, because FHA doesn't look at that, and that's a RAD requirement. But that's it, right? That's all. We don't care what level of rehab we're doing. We don't care what their operating expenses are. We want to see them, but we're not underwriting them. Someone else is underwriting them.
Robert, what is likely to be the timing of an FHA deal supposed to do an FHA concept call, have this RAD concept call. By the time I ask for a RAD concept call, have I already had the
Should've.
FHA call?
Yes.
Or is the FHA call coming soon after?
They should have had the FA. I believe if they're doing it the way they ought to be doing it, because remember, the concept call request in RAD is I'm ready to submit my financing plan. So the idea of this is I've got everything, my ducks in a row, I'm ready to go, right? I'm likely to push the submit button the next day.
Yeah.
So the lender narrative is part of, or the firm submission is part of the
Correct,
financing
the firm
plan.
submission is part of the financing plan submission.
Yeah.
So if you're really going FHA, then you should have already had the concept call with FHA to make sure that you've been invited to submit an FHA application, because there's no sense in even going in the RAD program.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. Okay. Right? Right. Right. Maybe that get what you want?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, thanks, everybody, and
Thanks.
we will talk to you all again soon.
Thanks, headquarters.
Bye.